Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. National championship game is set. Washington, Michigan, taking another deep dive into this matchup and specifically focusing on this Washington Huskies team and talking about some key matchups for them to win this game against Michigan. And many of you guys know the boys are Michigan Wolverine fans, scheming against their own team. Awfully difficult, but there are some matchups, some keys that you think Washington is going to try to exploit here in this matchup. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. The amount of support, especially from the Washington Husky fans, has been truly phenomenal. Cannot thank you guys enough. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, would love to hear from you guys in terms of how Washington wins this matchup. And for the Michigan fans, we'll be running this back, doing the same thing for Michigan, talk about key matchups that Michigan will be looking to take advantage of in this matchup as well. Without further ado, Dale, I'm going to give you the T-box here, starting with this matchup, Washington, Michigan. How are we feeling?
I mean, I think the very obvious and frankly, I think what a lot of people talk about and what I think Washington did a great job with against Texas was playing the game on their terms. And I think everyone knew that Texas probably wanted to slow it down a little bit, be able to run the football a little bit more effectively than they were able to, or at least sustain more running attacks, and they really weren't. And you saw when Washington got out and their offense started to make that a track meet, you just kind of see there really aren't. I don't know if there's any team in the country that's equipped to play that game with Washington because of how explosive they are.
Yeah, and I think that's a brilliant point. Like, you look at that Texas matchup, Texas probably wanted to run the football, control the time possession a little bit more than they did. They ran the football with their running backs for 6.5 yards per carry. They just didn't get to it enough. And I think you got to give a lot of credit to Washington for coming out and kind of jumping on Texas early, made them feel like they were playing from behind. They had to match what Michael Penix was doing. When you get the football and you just start scoring at will, I mean, Texas felt a lot of pressure to just try to keep up. And I think it got them kind of out of what they wanted to do and how that game wanted to look. And you look at Michigan and you look at how they've had success. They have success by controlling the time of possession, establishing that run, and playing good defense. So if you're Washington, and I'm like the biggest proponent of deferring to the second half, if Washington wins that coin toss, I'm not opposed for Washington saying we want football. We're going to go down, put up 7 points, and kind of try to similarly to like what you did with Texas, get them into that mode where we need to keep up with Michael Penix in this offense. Because you look at Michigan, Washington, who can score the most points in 4 quarters, and it turns out to be a shootout. Washington's taking Michael Penix in that offense all day of the week, and I can't blame them.
Yeah, because you've seen Michigan do a good job grinding teams out and playing complementary football where if they get a turnover, they capitalize and they play good defense all year, obviously. But you also can tell they don't execute on offense at nearly kind of the clip, at least when Washington's really going. Like when Washington's at the height of their powers, Michigan can't keep up with that in terms of like offensive production straight up. So that to me, it will be the big thing. If they can really score and really play fast and create a lot of possessions just generally, they should be in a good shape because, again, Michigan just isn't quite as efficient.
It's dragging Michigan out of their comfort zone. Like, where's Michigan comfortable? They're comfortable putting together those 8-minute drives. And if you're Washington, you don't want to allow that because you don't want Michael Penix sitting on the bench for 8 minutes of this game. So for Washington to get out to a quick start, turn this game into kind of a shootout-ish game, that's kind of how you want it to look. And that's not to discredit this Washington defense and their ability to win ugly. Like, they've done that against Arizona, but you're looking at how you want this game to look and how you want to win this football game. It's on the backs of Michael Penix in this wide receiver group. Now, Dill, the second thing I want to talk about here is protecting Michael Penix, and the dummies all over the national media, hand up, because I definitely was on this boat too heading into that semifinal game, was I don't think Washington can pass protect for Michael Penix. They did a damn good job, right? He was hit one time, I think was sacked 0 times throughout that game. You look at how Michigan generates pressure and how they were able to generate pressure against Alabama. It was less of just, hey, we're going to trust our pass rushers to win their one-on-ones, and a lot more kind of playing games and running stunts and sending different blitz packages from different places of the football field. In Alabama, in that offensive line, they had true freshmen starting at left tackle, couldn't really deal with that. Their blitz pickups and their stunt pickups were not good. You talk about why Washington won the Joe Moore Award. It's, yes, their offensive line, the individuals are phenomenal, but I think that Washington offensive line, what made it special was the sum of the parts. and they played extremely solid as a unit in terms of picking up blitzes and picking up stunts and not blowing assignments. Michigan is going to try to get Washington to blow their assignment runners into the backfield. The Washington throughout the whole year has been very good at not allowing that to happen.
You know what else Washington has that obviously Alabama doesn't on the offensive line is athleticism. I mean, Alabama, you look at that offensive line, they're all pushing that like 330 to 350 to 360 kind of range. Yep. I mean, Washington, again, as much as people want to come after Parker Brailsford for being on the lighter side, he did a fine job. I saw him one on those guys. He held his own. He was tough enough. But honestly, I just think the athleticism they play with, like, they can pick blitzes up because they can move laterally at a much better clip than some of those heavy teams like Alabama is. And Alabama does some things really well. They can move you around and move you off the football probably better than what Washington can do. But Washington's much better athletically. They're much better blocking in space. And with that comes being able to play a little bit better, I think, frankly, against stunts, because you can get off your block and move laterally and slide to the open gaps in a way that you just kind of saw Alabama really didn't have. They're a downhill team. Washington's just a much more athletic O-line.
And that unit just plays as one, which I think is really important. Like you saw Alabama, I mean, they had a true freshman left tackle. They have a lot of young guys on that offensive line, and they just struggled to communicate. Like when you saw some of the games and stunts they played, they just didn't pick them up because they weren't used to doing that. And so Washington, you feel a little bit better about how they can handle what Michigan is trying to do in terms of that pass rush. Now, the last talking point for Washington on the offensive side of the football, and it's an obvious one, but it's an important one. And Dill, as a Michigan fan, you ask, who do you not want to play? I had a buddy text me after the Michigan game. We clinched our spot to the national championship. Who would you rather play, Washington, Texas? And I saw the way Michael Penix played in the first two quarters of that football game. Said, I think I'd rather see Texas. Because the way Michael Penix played, with how those wide receivers play, it was on another level. And there's a certain point where it's just, you can't play defense against that. When Michael Penix is extending time, keeping his eyes downfield, putting balls in the only places that his offensive wide receivers can make plays on him, there's not really a defense for that. And if Washington can replicate that performance that they had against Michigan, I mean, Washington's going to have a phenomenal shot at winning this football game.
And that's the fundamental, like at the barest level or the ground level, if you will, what's so scary about Washington is when that offense plays kind of close to what its peak is. Yeah. You're just there again. What you said, there's no defense for a perfect pass. And like when Washington's doing it, their guys catch everything somehow. And when Michael Penix is putting it on them, like, I mean, some of those throws, he was throwing the ball like almost immediately, just throwing it. Felt like it was like kind of an air ball or like a Hail Mary, if you will, and then just drops it right in the butt. It's like, it was unbelievable, some of those throws. And that's, you're right. If Washington does that, they're going to be so hard to beat, because like then that's just like, okay, that puts the game on Washington's terms, and Michigan's got to keep up. And you just haven't seen Michigan play that type of offense at any point that like that peak what Washington will look like.
And you're also probably looking for certain matchups, right? Like Will Johnson going to probably be a top 15 NFL draft pick when he's eligible to go to the draft. And I'm not saying a guy like Rome can't just win his one-on-one matchup, but you're also probably looking at certain matchups that you can get that are favorable. When you have three NFL wide receivers all on the same offense with an NFL quarterback throwing them, there are going to be matchups that present themselves for Washington. You're looking for those matchups to really take advantage of. Now, on the defensive side of the football, the biggest key for me is finding a way, and again, it goes back to the number one thing, playing on your terms. You can't allow Michigan to do what they want to do. And what does Michigan want to do? They want to run the football. They want to control the time possession. Can Washington stop Michigan's run game with a six-man box? I think a lot of Washington fans would say, no, we probably need to add a hat or two, 8-man, 7-man boxes to slow down Michigan's rushing attack. And that's probably how you want to play Michigan. Because if there's one maybe weakness, you could say, from Michigan's personnel on offense, they don't have that elite wide receiver. That a guy that like a Rome, I mean, Washington don't know anything about not having elite wide receivers. They got some dudes on that side of the football. Michigan, I mean, Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson, solid wide receivers, but you're probably comfortable with Jabbar Muhammad going one-on-one with a guy like Cornelius Johnson, saying, hey, that safety that's going to be over the top of Jabbar Muhammad, we're going to put him in the box, try to slow this Michigan rushing attack down, because that's probably the best recipe of keeping Michigan off the field on offense and kind of disrupting what they want to do on the ground.
And that's where, again, you get into like, I think people don't give Washington enough credit for what they did against Texas. I feel like sometimes the narrative sounds like it's, oh, Texas just didn't run the ball. They didn't get to their ground game. Well, Texas had a lot of penalties and a lot of issues, like negative plays that Washington forced. And at the end of the day, kudos to Washington. It's not, they're not playing air, I guess you'd say. Like Texas was forced into some tough spots because Washington played a fairly aggressive style of defense against them and were able to create those negative plays. And if they can do that, that to me is the real key. It's like you want to be able to stop the run, but probably the biggest thing is you want to create negative plays. You want to create penalties. And how do you do that? You play very aggressive football. And again, you kind of talked about it. Like you have a guy in Jabbar Muhammad. I think you should be able to leave on a bit of an island, frankly, against some of these Michigan wideouts. And you feel pretty comfortable, I think, for the most part. So if you can play super aggressive because you now have that luxury of having a Jabbar Muhammad that you didn't have last year, I think that's how you can kind of get Michigan into some tough spots. And when they give up, when they don't stay on schedule, I think that's a very kind of tried and true method to beat a Michigan style offense.
And it's like kind of going back to playing their personnel. Like when you have a cornerback like the level of Jabbar Muhammad and there's not a wide receiver on the other side that you're super concerned about, you can kind of take advantage of that. Like that's a personnel advantage that you have. So we're going to take that personnel advantage and kind of use it to supplement maybe where we're disadvantaged, which is
you even saw Alabama be able to do that, especially in that second half of football where they went very heavy, they went very aggressive, they started to stop the run and make you complete a bunch of passes in tight windows. And you obviously kind of saw Michigan's offense sputter a little bit for that part of the game. If they can do that and they can play hyper aggressive football, I think that does give them a good shot to, again, get a couple free drives, if you will, give up a holding penalty, take away a possession. And if Michigan gives up too many possessions, they're obviously in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of the recipe that what we have. And for Washington fans, we're going to run it back for Michigan, talk about how Michigan beats Washington, a much more enjoyable podcast episode for the boys. Really excited. Again, Washington fans can't wait for the game. This has been a program and a team that we've loved talking about. You guys have shown a ton of support. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.